All right, get started. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the film that you just saw, the composer, Mr. Brad Fiedel here.
Thank you.
Sorry, you crossed the line.
I should know not to go in front of the speakers.
That's all right. Brad, that was absolutely fantastic to be able to watch this here on the 30th anniversary, and you were just telling me this was the first time you've seen it in a theater since the premiere.
Yeah. Yes. I'm still getting PTSD from that.
And also, this is not the first Terminator movie that you did.
No, I did the Terminator.
The Terminator. Yep.
Yeah, that was. It's interesting to see this and be reminded. Well, a little story. I met my wife between the first Terminator and this. So she was with me at the premiere to this, but she had never seen the Terminator. And it wasn't something, it just didn't come up somehow. We had kids and they were too little, whatever. And recently there was a company that decided to try to put on a live show of the Terminator with live band, which was quite a feat, and I helped them develop it. And it was supposed to premiere at Royal Albert Hall in London last May, so you know what happened to that.
Oh no.
I don't know that it'll ever be resurrected.
Yeah.
But anyway, in preparation for that, we screened the Terminator, and she freaked out. I mean, it's so much darker and go for the throat, in a sense. This is like a big Hollywood adventure sci-fi movie, whatever, however you would categorize it. This, especially when you see that ending, it's all
I almost
hard.
say even horror. Certain parts are horror elements to it.
The original.
Well, the original.
Well, this a little bit,
yeah,
but I mean, there's just something about the other one that was just so, even the colors.
Yeah.
There's a lot of warm colors here. The whole thing was black and blue, and you know.
That's true.
Anyway,
yeah.
so it was interesting, the contrast between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to know kind of how you felt into this with Terminator and this I guess young director James Cameron, and how did you get approached by it? How'd you get the job?
Well, I've been scoring stuff for almost 10 years at that point, but very in New York, interesting high-level television projects, like a project called Playing for Time. I mean, talk about contrast. It was about a concentration camp and a woman's orchestra. The writer was Arthur Miller, so I was collaborating at age 29 with Arthur Miller. Little different kind of thing, you know? So people think, oh, this is who Brad is. It was from out of the blue, but a young agent in the office of the people that represented me presented music to Jim, and the main agents, the main partners were not, they weren't that interested, low budget, horror, action, whatever. And she just kept saying, Brad, you gotta do this movie. And I bless her to this day for it, you know. And Jim just listened to my music in his car for a few weeks and thought there was something there. She did put together a tape, not of the kind of stuff I was talking about, but I mean of stuff that related in some way, some of the more sci-fi and suspense stuff that I'd done. And Jim came with his partner Gail Ann Hurd and showed me the film, and we talked and we moved forward.
So the Terminator was a fairly big hit when it came out. I think it raised opened some eyes in terms of what it could do for the genre, you know, in terms of everything. But I think that score that you did, that original theme, you know, I think for a lot of movie-going folks, that it's so iconic, and it is so, just the moment you hear it, you know it's Terminator. I mean, there's no questions, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, and I mean, I'm going to credit that to you, or because it is so amazing, that score. Am I wrong on that, or right? Thank you. So did you know it was? I mean, when you're sitting there and you're watching this, before it's scored, before you start your work, and you're looking at what Jim has shot. Did you think that it was going to be as big as it is?
The original.
The original, yeah.
I didn't know.
Okay.
No, I really didn't. But I have to say something. I've been working in low and medium budget films, not that many, mostly these kind of high-level TV projects. And I had a lot of experience of meeting with the director before I saw the screening. And they always had a lot to say about what they were doing, and just really this amazing. I was like ready to see something, and often it was like, wait a minute, where is it? The thing that they were telling me about, they didn't get it. The trick is you can have a script, you can have imagination, but getting it on film is a challenge, especially in lower budgets and fast schedules. But it's amazing how many people really got to a point where they kind of had this out-of-sync idea with what they did. Jim talked to me about the film, and I saw the film, and it was there. That's what I do remember. Yeah. I don't, have any idea of how it would do commercially, or whether people would accept this kind of almost new level, new bar of relentlessness, and a kind of complex concept of a story, of the time of it all and how it all takes place. So we didn't know. In fact, I remember the first screening was an industry screening, and Jim was like nobody. He was like an art director, and then he directed, I think, Piranha 2 or something like that. And people were laughing in the wrong. There's some good laughs in both of the films, but they were laughing in the wrong places, right? And we're kind of, and then we walked out. This was at the Directors Guild in L.A. And I'll never forget, Jim was standing off to the side, like in the corner, as people were filing out, and he was like white as a sheet, because he had a lot at risk for this. And I remember myself and my electric violinist, Ross Levinson, who plays on both scores, walked over and said, "No, it's great, it's going to be great," and he really was it was a bit of a shaky moment. Then I went off for a very rare vacation for like 3 weeks to Europe, and I came back and there was a pile, someone had been collecting her mail, a pile of the trade papers, Variety, Hollywood Reporter. And I'm like seeing the story unfold, and it wasn't that it was huge, but it was way above expectations for what it was,
Right.
And that was great. And the other thing that happened was I turned on my answering machine. I'd never met anyone in the cast. This was post-production. I'm separate. I'm in my cave writing the music. The shoot's already happened. And there was a message from Linda Hamilton on my old-fashioned answering tape.
Yeah, after the beep.
Yeah, after the beep. And she just left me the sweetest message about how the music couldn't have been better to support the film. And it was just, anyway, it was moving. It doesn't happen often that an actor who's usually moved on to their next project reaches back to a composer and does something like that.
Right. Yeah. And so The Terminator was, a big success. And did you have any thoughts that you might be saddling back up again for a part 2?
Well, Jim classically takes a long time between films.
He kind of does, yeah.
And that was like 7 years or something?
That was quite a bit, yeah.
So I had kind of, I went on and was always scrambling as a freelance person and trying to keep a variety so I didn't get pigeonholed, which is Hollywood's want to do. And no, I really didn't know for sure. He was like, well, he went off and he did Aliens.
Right, another little movie.
Yeah, with the wonderful James Horner, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. Right. He kind of was going back and forth between James and I. It was kind of interesting. But anyway, I didn't, and then I got the call to talk to him, and the script, which was numbered. So picture, it's a script, every page has a big red stamp, like all the way diagonally across the page with a particular security code on it. This is back then, right?
It's a little different today.
It's all analog. But the bottom line was, if that script showed up anywhere, that number was attached to my name, and I would, they'd take my firstborn,
Well, and so you got the call before, was it before production started, or was it, again, just kind of...
A little bit before.
Okay.
I think they were in kind of like pre-mode.
Just trying to kind of, hey, guess what, Brad, little heads up here.
Well, what was cool was Jim was he was shooting, and then his editor was cutting sequences.
Okay.
Out of order, out of context, but they would send me videos, because we knew by the time the film went, it was running late. The release date, which was now, 30 years,
right,
July
today.
4th weekend, those never move. The marketing department rules all, right?
Yeah.
So they delay the film, then the shoot gets late. The composer's the last addition, right? The last creative to make a contribution for the most part. And we have to do it no matter what. So what was supposed to be 6 weeks became 5 weeks, became 4 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
That sounds like it. But I guess, so when you're coming into the second one, you kind of know the story a little bit more at this point. You kind of know a little bit of the characters. And I kind of want to get into just the kind of the method behind some of the themes, that dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I mean, you hear it throughout, and you hear just that constant rhythm and metal clanking. What was the reason behind it? I mean, it's almost like when we were just watching it, it's suddenly when it goes to slow motion, and it's like all the sounds just go away except for the score, and you just hear that rhythm just hitting through. How much is that you're going into it, or with what Jim's trying to do, or how does that work out? Or is it different between each sequence?
Well, for these films particularly, it's very intuitive and gut level, my process, in creating the theme from the very beginning, So for the most part, luckily, we were in sync, because on this one, he was almost never available. I did this all in my garage, in my studio in my garage, and which Jim joked about. The most expensive movie ever made, and you're scoring it in your garage. But I needed his approval before finalizing every piece of music, right? He needed to say yes, or yes, but a little bit to the left here, or whatever. Luckily, we were very in sync, because there was no time. And often I would wait for him till 2 a.m. before he could free up enough time to come by for an hour and sign off, so I could move forward, basically.
And so he came to your garage.
He would just come by.
That's awesome.
And which was in Studio City.
Yeah.
And luckily not that far from some of the places he was shooting in Burbank. But then they were mixing it in Lucas Skywalker Ranch in Northern California.
Right.
And I literally had a courier, because this was analog. You couldn't just send it over the internet or something. So these are tapes that I'm mixing it to. And there's a guy sitting, I didn't want him in my studio. He's sitting on a folding chair out on my parking pad, outside the door, waiting for the cues from Reel 3. I would hand him those. He would literally run to Burbank Airport, get on a plane, and fly to Northern California.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That is a PA right there. But it's amazing. And so
I didn't really answer your question. So it was very intuitive.
Right.
I don't. In a film like this, if my intellect got too involved, I wouldn't trust it very much, because the audience, Jim never wanted the audience to be too engaged this way. He wanted here and here, just like to impact, so.
Well, because the movie is it's constant. You're just always getting bombarded by stuff, and
right.
I mean that's the machines too, so it works on the character level, but it works on a story level as well. you know.
Well, the whole thing about the rhythm that you're talking about is it's really almost non-musical music, and that's true in both Terminators. The sound for the T-1000, which you might not have even distinguished as score, but there's a sound that I created often when he's around that's just like,
yeah.
And it was actually real instruments. It was a reverse of a brass. Anyway, it's a long story, but it was almost everything in this movie originated with acoustic instruments. Not that I performed, but that I got from samples, and then I would play with them and turn them upside down and backwards and do stuff. But that rhythm was just almost like, it's his heartbeat. So if he's on the scene, there are times where we chose not to have it, which is actually makes a big impression, because if in this film, when the things noticed, even in these sequences, when there's a moment of quiet, it's very dramatic, because you're getting bombarded all the time. So you're like, it's just that.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Another thing that I was thinking of, watching like that last scene there in the with the furnaces and everything. I'm sitting there thinking, well, first of all, they should have grabbed his hand, because now there's another 4 sequels after this one. But you don't hear the machinery going on in the background. Everything it looks like was put in post. All the sounds and the sound design and everything like that. How much did you work with the sound designers to go with your music as well? Because your music is very metallic as well.
Yeah, and there were some moments I noticed where I kind of went, where there's like some clash. We didn't have time. In the best of all possible worlds, we would have had conferences. And
how much time did you have on this?
Well, I had this early time where I was developing while they were shooting. But from the time where I had to really frame by frame compose, no time really, because they kept changing the length of the special effects. So I was constantly recomposing. But I would say the main thrust of the time, which is why I say I have PTSD, I think I was working about 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 3 weeks.
Wow, 3 weeks.
Yeah, but I had more time than that, but that was the actual final production of the music, where I had to compose it.
That's when you were handed the final cut.
Final cut, and go, oh, okay, this is kind of how long. And even yet, I didn't see all of it. Yeah. There were slugs.
Really?
So you're watching something that goes, scene missing, or effect missing. Sometimes it's like a cartoon, like they have like a little drawn.
So you had no idea what it looked like until it was.
No, some of it.
Oh, some of it. Huh?
Yeah, but not all of it.
Okay, and so now getting back to the sound design though. So how much did you work with them on?
I didn't.
You didn't. You didn't
really
have time.
Didn't. No, like. and the scary thing for me, aside from this film, I've been at the final mix, which is where almost a theater-like room with a huge board. There's usually a guy on sound effects, a guy on dialogue, and a guy on music, or gal, whoever's there. And that's the film dub, we call it. And I have been at every single one of mine, because I realized early on as a composer that that's where the music really gets finished. Because if something's played louder than you intended it, it's wrong. If something's played quieter than you intended it, it's wrong. And you can't always get it perfect, obviously, when you're competing with all that.
Do you guys usually fight about who?
No, in fact, a lot of composers would not even be allowed, because they just don't have time to hear a point. Right. So I really picked my battles and didn't wear out my welcome, But I didn't get to do that on T2, because I was composing in LA while they were mixing, so I didn't know how the sound effects sounded.
Wow.
I wasn't there to say, hey, if we take that high presence that you have that has a pitch to it, and we pitch it down, it'll be less weird with the music, because my music has a pitch, and this tone of a whistle or just like a machine drone, that it's like, and my music is, and it's like, it'll go together. But they did a great job. They had great people. So.
What do you take away from your work on any one of the Terminators? What are you most proud of? Any certain parts or anything that stands out in your memory that you're just like, yeah?
For this one and Jim, it was like his main thing was that I actually got it done on time.
Well, that's true.
And literally, I would wake up at 4 a.m. in just almost like a cold sweat, like, gotta go back to work, gotta go back. Because it really was almost impossible. And I developed a whole technical system with 2 big music computers and all this stuff to be able to do it on time by showing Jim stuff without having to record it till anyway, there were all these technical aspects that were almost as important, because if I hadn't finished, it would have been a disaster.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that last sequence. I mean, it's moving. You know, it's very. I hate to use the word, but relatively, especially the first one, not as much this one, but I hate to use the word cheesy. There's a kind of synthesizer back in time, which now is very hip again.
Yep.
And it's a sound that I worked for years to kind of get away from. But there's certain limitations to the technology. So I do hear some place where my imagination was here and what was able to be done, partially just because this was on an optical soundtrack originally. So there couldn't be that much information on the soundtrack.
Right.
Just right now, if you go to one of the big, you know, sci-fi action movies, you know, the Marvel or the whatever, it's so loud. They just put everything. They just keep throwing. We didn't have that ability. We had a ceiling of 85 decibel compared to 110 you're hearing in some of these movies, which is making people deaf. We were talking about this earlier with John. But anyway, yeah, so given the time and whatever, you know, for the most part, I seem to be able to watch it without wincing too much. There are a couple of places where, of course, I would do it differently now.
Sure.
But there's a certain depth that's available now in the bottom end and the top end, technically, that wasn't available then.
How many people did you have for your orchestra? I mean, you say you did in your garage, but you still had folks doing 2.
Me?
2.
Playing 95%
Wow.
of everything that you're hearing.
Wow.
Percussion, keyboards, whatever. And then the wonderful Ross Levinson, who can do on an electric violin just stuff that does these visuals justice. Sometimes it sounds like an electric guitar, but sometimes it's just like a tearing sound, you know?
That's amazing.
So it was really the 2 of us.
Well, and then, but you didn't, after Terminator, that again, the Terminator 2, is a huge success. I would even say these are one of those movies where the sequel may have overstepped the original. And how did you think that was going to be the case again when you saw that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. There are, and this I didn't expect, but there are fans of one or the other that don't like the other.
Really?
They're real fans of the first one that feels this got too Hollywood and too big and too soft, because they like that kind of low budget,
the gritty
edge,
you
know.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't. I mean, I think that once I started, I knew more on this one than the other one, and certainly there was a lot at risk. As I said, at the moment, it was the most expensive movie ever made.
Wow. Now, I would be remiss in not asking you this question because I'm a theme park nerd, and there was a little attraction at Universal Studios. It was Terminator 2 3D, and you worked on that one as well?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
What did you think about doing a theme park attraction and doing the music again for that?
Well, I didn't. For me, it wasn't a theme park attraction. Ultimately, they put it together that way.
Sure.
I scored a film.
The film, yeah.
Yeah, so the film was this 12 minutes long or
something like that.
It was a central thing, and it was on a screen. There are other things, you know, but I didn't have anything to do with that. But the thing that was wild about that is the original was in Orlando, Florida.
Right, yep.
And there was no mixing stage in the world that had the ability to mix that. Because now it's pretty common, Atmos or whatever, but back then it had 24 independent speaker channels.
In the auditorium.
Yeah, so this way, that way, this way, everywhere. So I had to record it specially. I had all these separate tapes that had to be coordinated. And in order to mix it, we had to sit in the actual building, in the room in Orlando at night when everybody went home. And we would mix it in that room.
Wow.
Because that's the only room that had that speaker system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just know I've seen that probably more times than I've seen the movies. You know,
Really?
I'm not going to admit how long I lived at Universal Studios, but it was a long time.
One thing I want to say about that is that I just remembered is that actually that was rather nerve-wracking because Jim was not there.
Really?
He was, I don't know what he was doing at the time.
But he shot the film portion.
No. But in post-production, he was totally off doing something. I don't know, he was in deep diving in the ocean, what he was doing.
Right. I think Titanic was coming up.
Raising the Titanic.
Yeah.
But it was really kind of nerve-wracking because he is so particular that I was like, oh, this is really interesting because I'm just shipping this stuff. And I mean, I played him some ideas for motifs, but cue by cue, he wasn't. I think he came once or twice, but he wasn't as involved on that.
Wow. And then you worked on another project with him, though. Another one of my favorite films, True Lies. Right? See, I'm not alone. True Lies is awesome, and so was it fun to get back into it? And that one you were not doing in your garage, was that?
No, I actually did because the picture was over budget, and I wanted full orchestra, and the studio said, "Oh my God," because they had done not that long before The Abyss with Jim, which was. Oh, I'm blanking. Alan Silvestri, really nice guy, did the music on that. And they were really afraid of Jim and full orchestra. Because when you got 100 gals sitting there, and you stop for half an hour to discuss or argue or try to make a change on something, I mean, it's just, that's how it goes through the roof. So there was a time thing. So they made me really, really promise that I would make sure that didn't happen. So I said, absolutely. Oh my God. So I mocked up every one of those cues in my studio, like note for note.
Yeah.
Then when he'd approve it, it would be orchestrated, the parts would be printed, and we ended up doing about 7 days of sessions, and I think ultimately there were hundreds of musicians because you don't get the same people every day. That's weird.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So you get your first chairs, but often, if you have a section of 30 some odd string players, it's not necessarily on Tuesday that everybody who's there on Monday because they're booked somewhere else. But these people are amazing. They just read it and play it. Barely rehearsal. So there were like 600 musicians all together coming and going. But that was great because I've been waiting to combine some of my studio stuff with more classic, acoustic orchestra.
Right, I was going to say, because I remember the score from True Lies and how sweeping and epic it is as well. And it's a completely different vibe than what you get on Terminator.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it had precedent. See, the thing is, Terminator had no precedent. Yeah. So I was totally create from scratch something totally unique. True Lies, on the other hand, was quoting stuff. Okay. It really was not my score. Exactly, but the film, it was tongue-in-cheek James Bond. It had all these elements that weren't another world. They were identifiable. So I have to say I was influenced by other music. When Jim said, in the first 8 bars of this, if they don't know it's for fun, and it's not a Terminator, because it was him and Arnold and me again, right? So he said, if we're dead. Yeah. And without really realizing it, I started to write something, and I realized I was being heavily influenced by Leonard Bernstein's music, dance music for West Side Story.
Oh.
So in that opening thing of sequence,
not the tango scene there.
No, but the opening sequence where the opening sequence where Arnold's going down the mountainside. Yeah. I made him dance. It was done, whoever did it, I'm sure it was a double, but
right.
But the somersaults and the running in his tuxedo, and I did try to make it feel like dance,
Yeah.
That was fun.
That's fantastic. All right. I've been sitting here asking Brad a lot of questions. I think maybe open it up to you guys if you have any questions you'd like to ask. Got one in the back. I'll walk over the mic.
These seats are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I'm just wondering, are they editing with like a temp track to start and then you score, and do you give them the temp track, or how does all that work?
Well, this is a long discussion, but you brought up the reason why I eventually wasn't really sad to move away from the whole area, because the temp track became the ruling creative force of music and film. As the technology got such, with digital and CDs, the film editor would have a stack of the best scores of all time and look at a scene and just plop on, oh, this is that cue from Gladiator I really love, or this is, so they throw all this music on, and often I had to beg for my first screening to not have that music on so my imagination could be, it was like a romantic triangle. Before, it was me and the film, and it was this love thing. You know, even if the film wasn't perfect, I would find what I loved about it and, you know, find a way to work with it. But once you hear a scene with another piece of music, you're in a triangle then, because you're kind of second guessing, well, my imagination is sort of telling me this, but they had this, so maybe I need to go in the middle. You know, it's really not conducive. Luckily with Jim, never happened. He had Temp Track, because directors were often, rightfully so, didn't believe in the patience of studio execs to watch a film without music, because then they would say, oh, this scene's too long. They didn't understand, really, you know. So there was a temp track, but he spared me from listening to it. And with other directors that I work with, like Jonathan Kaplan on The Accused, or certain people that I had a good relationship, they would let me they would make a video print without the temp music. But they were, and on this one what was fun was that I was, and on True Lies, because I was working in my studio and getting sequences, I would ship him my temp version of that cue, and they would start to put it in so that there was like this temp version, but it was the music that I was actually designing for that. So that's the best way to go, yeah.
All right, we got one more question here.
Hi. So first off, I want to say that my favorite part that you did was during the scene where he has the minigun shooting at all the cops and everything, and the score is just so cool and laid back, and like, it's not like, if it was done today, it'd be like Motley Crue or some shit. Yeah. Like, it's just so laid back, and I think it fits his personality perfectly. So thank you for that. Oh, thank you for your effort of doing, what, 20 hours a day for 3 weeks? Like, that's ridiculous. But given the time that this was done, did you have any pressures? Because it was kind of the same time where everything was transitioning to like digital audio and all the effects like that. And you said it was all based off of analog instruments that you then converted. Was there like a pressure to do that, or is that just a choice that you wanted to kind of run with?
Yeah, no pressure artistically, other than to make sure Jim loved every scene. And you know what? He did, with one exception. And luckily it was a scene that he sent me early, and that was the canal chase. Because I looked at that and I saw this big heavy truck. And I really, it was like dealing with the truck. I was the truck. And he said, he listened to me and he went, no, Brad. You're the scared mouse. So it was like, this is the way I love to work as a composer. People say, I don't know much about music. I'm like, oh, thank God. You know, because the people who think they know about music are likely to say, this is a funny scene, it needs a xylophone. You know, but in this case, it really was important that he gave me like kind of an acting direction. That works best, because in my imagination, he's not saying, I want you to write, you know, he's just saying, I want you to really score the fear of that kid, and the sound effects will take care of the truck and the size of it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But all the choices to go back, because I get off the tracks on there, all the choices about the texture of it, the choice of sounds were mine, and then I showed Jim and explained to him where I was coming from, and we agreed.
All right, we got one right here.
Hi, my name's Amberly. I'm this guy's wife.
Oh, hi, Amberly.
Hi, nice to meet you. As a wife, as a mother, I've just been in awe of the Central Coast Film Society and the effort my husband and the team have put into reaching our community. And over the last year or so, we've obviously seen how important it is for our community to find new ways to reinvent themselves as a human development, education track that I'm on. Building resiliency is also really important and a strong focus in our education system. As I hear you speak about the amount of hours and time you have put into all of this, I would love to know if you have some sort of advice, inspiration that you can offer our community for anyone who is wanting to step into these big dreams and goals that they may have.
Do you mean specifically writing music for film or just in general?
Open to interpretation. I imagine you weren't alone in all of this. So what really touched you and led you to be able to get to this point?
And I will add, you were doing this in your garage, which a lot of people this last year were doing as well.
Yeah, there you go. It's funny because I had a great run, and it had kind of a shape to it. And I think that when I was young and starting out, I was just so gung-ho. I would just, I wanted to make it work. I loved film. I didn't come in wanting the music to be shown off. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and this was my contribution. So I think in general, for me, who wanted to be a rock star as a teenager, I had to make an adjustment. And somebody very wise said to me, you have the passion and the talent as a musician. If you stay with this, you're going to find a place. But I had to go for a number of years not knowing what that place was and just trying things, So I think being open, flexible, but committed, and whenever you have an opportunity, just go into the wall for it,
Awesome. Yeah. There are a couple of other questions. All right, we'll go here and then here.
Thank you for a great score. We really appreciated that. And I've read stories from crew members who have worked on James Cameron films, and some not so kind comments about what a tyrant he can be and how difficult he is. Some people love working with him. So I was just wondering, is that true? Is he really difficult to work with, or is he a fair person?
So I basically completed 3 films before I saw the Mr. Hyde side, to be honest. So I had a very special situation. He would come, and it would be the 2 of us, maybe my music editor, in my studio, and it was almost always respectful, and everything was cool. A couple of times he got uptight just because of time, and a computer was taking too long to load. So I had this very unusual situation and way that I worked with him. On True Lies, I came to the final mix, and I saw a moment with somebody who was working on the film where he just obliterated them. And I literally walked out of the room, because I was so shocked. And I can't tell you why or what, but I do know that he has one of those rare brains. I mean, if he could write the music, he would. He is so engaged in everything that I think the pressure on him, because he always sticks his neck out. I just think it's pressure. And, sometimes it gets away from him. I don't think it's his intent. But I do know, and I have seen, he can be tough. He can be really tough.
All right. We got right here. Yep.
So I was wondering, you spoke about how your time before, or, you were running out of time before you really even had time to start T2.
Right.
What was your spotting session with Jim like at that time, and how did that maybe differ from the Terminator and True Lies, if you can recall?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It all flows. For those of you who don't know, the spotting session is when a composer sits with director, producer. In TV, the producers are often there and the director's already gone, and you go through second by second. You say there's music here, and it starts here, and it ends here, and maybe a comment about the thought of what it might be or the direction for it, and there's notes. And those notes become the Bible of what you deliver, basically. On the Terminator films, the music is so everything is so relentless that it's like I don't remember really a classic spotting session. I do remember talking about things like that canal chase or whatever, and maybe occasionally Jim would say, "We're going to be quiet here," but it was, I forget the number of minutes, but there's a lot of music, but yeah, I don't remember singling out. I was just send sequence, write the music, go, go, go. I think it was just assumed that there was a lot of music, everywhere.
All right, I think we've got one more back here.
Well, thank you for coming. My name is Caleb, and I actually have a question I've been wanting to ask for 20 years, ever since I first saw the first two films. The tone is drastically different from the first and the second film. In the first film, you have this sense there's a whole bunch of swells, and in the main title theme, there's the drum beat, dun 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 dun.
Right.
And I noticed that wasn't in the second film, that dun 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 dun, and it became strictly dun 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 dun. So I'm kind of curious as to, did the genre of the film kind of have any effect on, the overall sound? Because I just noticed there's just little differences in the main theme that were changed, and then of course you added some in the second half of the T2 film where it got really orchestrated and epic. And I guess I have a kind of a tail-end question is out of the two scores, which one was more fulfilling to you as a composer?
Yeah, interesting. Well, obviously, the Terminator, Arnold's character, is very different in one film to the next film. So I don't remember, again, making intellectual or conscious decisions, but I applied, I kind of allowed this film to be, T2 to be what it was, talk to me, and then I talked back to it musically, so it was kind of just that kind of a cycle. And it's interesting because that motif you're talking about was created on a piece of technology called a Prophet 10 on the original Terminator. And when they were doing the Terminator live show, they couldn't get anywhere close to that sound, and I finally had to get this master guy in Britain who was, anyway, long story. But the bottom line is that it's a different kind of a feel for the original Terminator, and it just didn't even occur to me to go back to that particular element. It just didn't happen. Tell me, what was the tail question again?
Which one did you find more fulfilling?
I can't really say. I would have to say the second, because not only was it epic, but the whole scene was epic. I mean, the amount of money and the pressure and all of that, Jim would come back from the set, and the one time he kind of blew up in my studio, I couldn't believe how I answered him back. I thought I was going to get fired, but I said, "Jim, go home." I literally said, "Go home. I'm working too hard for you to talk to me that way." And my music editor was with me, and that came out of my mouth. And I looked at Alan. Alan looked at me, and we're like, it got very quiet. And then Jim finally said, "Brad, you sound just like what I just said to the Caracol people when they came on the set and were pressuring me." So all of that was just so epic. The first one was down and dirty. We didn't know, and there wasn't much money or it was this thing was amazing. Just on every level, and I think it kind of shows. And I think for me, the pressure of it is actually probably, I wouldn't choose it again, but it's probably a positive element of how the music came out, as far as me literally being just under pressure,
All right, well, I got to try this out because this looks just too cozy in here. I like it.
I'm Mr. Comfort.
They should flip these seats around. Now, Brad, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. Was there any other questions? Because we're running a little long. We got one more, Brad. You got time for one more?
Yeah, I'm good.
It's.
By the way, thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Here you go.
Oh, I just wanted to ask. A lot of scores are coming out on vinyl now with like these deluxe, like huge, amazing, expensive editions. What of your films would you like to see put onto vinyl on like a really deluxe, like liner note, nice thing that haven't already been put?
Well, the one that was a big deal because I finally got to do this. Someone had released my score from The Terminator without my supervision at one point. Not the original, but another one. And that always just made me crazy. It's a long story. But Milan Records came to me in 2015, 16, and I did a complete remix of The Terminator because my original mix on that was mono, because that film was mixed in mono.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Talk about not having confidence. There was a $50,000 bill to make that film mix in stereo, and Orion Pictures, who later took all the credit for why it was such a big hit, didn't want to invest the $50,000. So that's a mono. They made a fake stereo at one point, and then, my dates are crazy, but MGM did a wonderful special edition DVD where they paid me and we went back to Lucas Skywalker and did a 5.1 reel, not synthesized like this other thing that was done. But the original Terminator, I did a remix, and there's a beautiful edition on Milan Records. I'm cool with that. I actually brought some stuff. There's some vinyls of Serpent and the Rainbow. I don't know if anybody knows that film. But these are the old Verrace vinyls that I happen to have that I figured someone might enjoy. But yeah, I think vinyl's cool, I don't even have a turntable anymore, to tell you the truth. So I'm not that plugged in. I know the difference. I love the sound of analog.
Well, I just meant like, which of your scores would you like people to rediscover?
There's a score that I did, I think it was TNT. It was a television project, but it was beautifully done, shot in Europe, about Rasputin. It's called Rasputin. Alan Rickman, and an amazing cast, amazing, best British actors and everything. And that score was orchestra as well. Very, very different than all this, and I'd love to see that re-released. Some scores are getting re-released now because the Musicians Union has opened up to not charging the reuse payment. So if you do one and you print 1,500 or 3,000 copies, or like special editions, they don't charge you that huge union fee. So now there's an opening you'll see more scores coming out from everybody, that have orchestra. That was the problem before. To release an orchestra score, you had to have like a True Lies or something where you thought you'd make your money back, but not for a smaller film.
Another question.
I just want to know, you have a storied career. What young composers excite you?
Oh yeah, what's up and coming that you're enjoying?
I go to movies and I really just want to be an audience. I'm hearing a lot of good, very competent music. There was no school for film scoring when I came up. I had to learn everything on the job, But there's stuff is sounding really good. I'm not that drawn yet to actually feel some memorable, unique stuff. It kind of all has a sound to me that's pretty similar. But there's a lot of talented people coming up. There's a forum on Facebook for media composers, and there's just like hundreds of people on there, and there's a lot of talent. It got kind of democratized. It used to be a very tight club, and the technology has democratized it. But and I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. I have heard some quirky stuff that I really love it when somebody stretches and doesn't do the obvious.
I got a question for you, Brad.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Terminators you didn't work on?
Pieces of them.
Pieces of them. Okay. I was just wondering what your feelings were.
I haven't been moved by them.
Yeah.
And I don't think. I mean, there's something. I don't know. It's probably hard for me to be objective.
Yeah.
But it's more like which one is a little bit better than another one, as opposed to this one is good.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and my final question though for you. So, what you got in the pipeline? What are you working on? What's the next projects for you?
Well, since I kind of left the whole Hollywood thing, I've been writing original musicals, book, lyrics, and music.
Huh?
And I was thinking about this potential question because I've been interviewing in the release of. So in April last year, I released an audio version, like an audiobook version of my latest musical. I saw that Broadway was shut down, and before all the Zoom stuff started to happen, I rushed and I had all these audio elements for this musical. I just edited it and put it together and released it. It's called Full Circle. So if you Google Brad Fiedel, Full Circle, there's a YouTube. It doesn't have any visual, it's just cover art, but it's a full-on 2-act musical.
And it's on YouTube right now?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Wow, that's fantastic.
But again, it's just a listening experience. You have to, but friends have said, I was kind of worried about a musical without visuals, but they enjoy it.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
So that's the kind of thing, it's really funny because I think if you took my Terminator music and thought about how many people had heard it,
yeah,
and if you take my personal work that I've been doing in the last, it's really been decades. Like I did a one-man show that I was performing around, and because I was a singer-songwriter before doing all this stuff. But anyway, the bottom line is you're talking, I don't know, maybe millions and millions of people have heard my film music.
Yep.
As far as my personal work, I think we got up to 1,000 people listen to the YouTube.
Well,
yes. And you know what? It doesn't matter to me, but I really do appreciate people who have created a project. Because, I did some films, I didn't love the films, but retroactively, the fact that they got it together and got it made, and you were telling me about this project that you did, but you got to hand it to people, because I'm really good at creating, but networking, getting things out there, like trying to get this show on the stage, that kind of thing. I really respect the people who have that particular muscle. I like to sit in my cave and create stuff.
Right. Well, I think it's safe to say, Brad, that some of your music, though, is going to live forever in cinematic history from what we just saw on the screen. So, folks, let's give Brad a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Brad, for being here. Folks, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a great day and have a happy and safe 4th of July. Also, I do want to thank a big thank you to the movie experience, guys. They helped us host this. They're absolutely phenomenal, and I think we're gonna have to do more projects here, more events. What do you think? Yeah. All right, we'll do more. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.